3 days after posting his video, Marcus found himself standing outside the military charity office in central London, his hands shaking as he held a handwritten letter. After countless drafts and sleepless nights, he had decided that a public apology wasn't enough. He needed to find a way to personally make amends to Sergeant Mitchell and the families affected by his thoughtless words. The charity worker, Mrs. Patricia Wells, looked at Marcus with a mixture of skepticism and curiosity as he explained his situation. She had seen the viral video and the subsequent backlash. "Young man," she said firmly, "Sergeant Mitchell is not required to meet with you. He owes you nothing, and, frankly, you've caused enough pain already." Marcus nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know, ma'am. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just want to understand what I did wrong and find a way to help somehow. I've been reading about the families of the soldiers he saved, and I realize my words hurt them too. I want to make it right." Mrs. Wells studied the young man's face, seeing genuine remorse rather than the arrogance she had expected. After a long pause, she said, "Sergeant Mitchell visits our support group for veterans dealing with combat stress every Thursday evening. It's not my place to invite you, but I can ask if he's willing to speak with you." The wait felt eternal. Marcus had spent the intervening days reading everything he could find about combat veterans, PTSD, and the challenges faced by soldiers returning from war. He had contacted the families who had responded to his video, attempting to apologize directly. Some ignored him completely, but a few had responded with cautious acceptance of his remorse. Emma Harrison, the mother whose daughter still had her father thanks to Mitchell's actions, had written back, "My husband says the best apology is change behavior. If you're serious about learning from this, prove it with actions, not just words." On Thursday evening, Marcus sat in the charity's small meeting room, nervously fidgeting with his letter. When Sergeant Mitchell walked in, Marcus was struck by how ordinary he looked in civilian clothes. Without the uniform and ceremonial setting, he was just a regular man in his early 30s, with kind but tired eyes that seemed to carry invisible weight. "You're the young man from the video," Mitchell said quietly, taking a seat across from Marcus. His voice held no anger, which somehow made Marcus feel worse than if he had been shouted at. "Yes, sir. I wanted to apologize personally and to learn about what really happened that day. I know I have no right to ask, but I need to understand what I mocked so I can properly honor the truth." Sergeant Mitchell was silent for a long moment, studying Marcus's face. Finally, he spoke. "I don't wear that medal for recognition or glory. I wear it for the men who didn't come home and for the families who lost everything. Every day I put on that uniform, I carry their memory with me." Over the next hour, Mitchell shared his story. Not just the heroic actions that earned him the Victoria Cross, but the aftermath. The nightmares, the guilt about surviving when others didn't, the struggle to find meaning in civilian life. He described how the ceremonial duties at the palace provided structure and purpose while he worked through his trauma. "The hardest part," Mitchell said, "isn't the physical scars. It's wondering if I did enough, if I could have saved more lives. Your video hurt because it reduced the most meaningful moment of my life to a joke. But more than that, it dismissed the sacrifice of good men who died protecting their country." Marcus found himself crying, not from self-pity but from genuine understanding of the pain his words had caused. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know that's not enough, but I am truly, deeply sorry. I want to do something meaningful to honor the memory of the soldiers who were lost, and to support the families of those you saved." What happened next surprised both men. Mitchell didn't just accept Marcus's apology. He offered to help him channel his remorse into positive action. Together, they developed a plan for Marcus to volunteer with military charities, specifically helping to educate young people about the reality of military service and the true meaning of the honors bestowed upon servicemen and women. Marcus's first speaking engagement was at his former university, where he told his story to a room full of students. He didn't sugarcoat his mistake or try to excuse his behavior. Instead, he spoke honestly about the assumptions and privilege that had led to his ignorant mockery, and what he had learned about genuine courage and sacrifice. The presentation included interviews Marcus had conducted with family members of the soldiers Mitchell had saved. Emma Harrison appeared via video call with her daughter, explaining how Mitchell's heroism had preserved their family. The mother of Private Daniel Roberts, the soldier who had died despite Mitchell's efforts, spoke about finding peace through the knowledge that her son had been in the arms of a man who truly cared about bringing everyone home. Over the following months, Marcus transformed his viral moment of shame into a platform for education and support. He organized fundraising events for military charities, created educational materials about military honors, and became a regular volunteer at veteran support groups. The most powerful moment came 6 months later when Marcus stood beside Sergeant Mitchell at a memorial service for the soldiers lost in Afghanistan. As they laid wreaths in memory of fallen heroes, Marcus realized that his journey from mockery to understanding had taught him more than just respect for military service. He had learned about the difference between cynicism and wisdom, between privilege and responsibility. Sergeant Mitchell had become not just someone Marcus had wronged, but a mentor who had shown him how to transform shame into purpose. The Victoria Cross still hung proudly on Mitchell's dress uniform during ceremonies, but now Marcus understood that it represented not just one man's courage, but the collective sacrifice of all who serve. In his final reflection, Marcus wrote in his journal, "I thought I was exposing a fraud, but I was the fraud. I had lived my entire life without understanding real courage or sacrifice." Sergeant Mitchell didn't just save 12 soldiers that day in Afghanistan. He saved me from a lifetime of ignorant cynicism. The least I can do is spend my life honoring the truth I almost destroyed with my careless words. The young man who had once mocked a hero had become an advocate for heroes, proving that even the most shameful mistakes can become the foundation for meaningful redemption when met with genuine remorse and determined action. Marcus woke the next morning to find his phone buzzing with notifications. What started as excitement quickly turned to confusion and then to dread as he read through the messages flooding his social media accounts. The comments section of his video had transformed overnight from supportive mockery to angry corrections and detailed accounts of what actually happened on the day Sergeant James Mitchell earned his Victoria Cross. One comment, from a user named David_Miller_Army, contained a lengthy description that made Marcus's stomach drop. That guard you're mocking saved 12 lives in Helmand province when his convoy was ambushed. He ran through enemy fire 3 times to pull wounded soldiers to safety, then held off Taliban fighters for 40 minutes until backup arrived. He took shrapnel in his leg and still kept fighting. Show some respect. But it was Sarah Collins' article, which someone had linked in the comments, that truly began to unravel Marcus's world. The journalist had worked through the night to piece together the complete story of that day in Afghanistan, interviewing soldiers who were there and family members of those who were saved. According to the article, Sergeant Mitchell had been part of a routine patrol when their convoy hit an improvised explosive device. The blast had flipped their armored vehicle, trapping several soldiers inside, while Taliban fighters opened fire from hidden positions. Instead of seeking cover, Mitchell had immediately begun pulling his wounded comrades from the wreckage, exposing himself to constant gunfire. The article included a quote from Corporal Andy Harrison, one of the soldiers Mitchell had saved. "I was trapped under metal with my leg broken when James came back for me the second time. I told him to leave me, that it was too dangerous. He just said, 'I'm not leaving anyone behind,' and dragged me out while bullets were hitting the ground around us. If not for him, I'd never have seen my daughter again." Marcus read these accounts with growing horror, realizing the magnitude of his mistake. The man he had mocked as a fancy mannequin had literally risked his life to save others. The medal he had dismissed as meaningless represented genuine heroism that Marcus couldn't even comprehend. His phone rang, startling him from his reading. It was his father, calling from work. "Marcus, what the hell did you do? Someone sent me a video of you making fun of a war hero. The whole office is talking about it." Before Marcus could respond, his father continued, "I've been getting calls all morning. Your mother's crying because people are saying terrible things about our family online. You need to fix this immediately." Marcus tried to explain himself, but his words sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Dad, I didn't know. I thought it was just... how was I supposed to know he was actually a hero?" "You weren't supposed to know, Marcus. You were supposed to show basic respect for someone in uniform. You were supposed to think before you opened your mouth and posted something for the world to see." After hanging up, Marcus continued reading about Sergeant Mitchell. He learned that after the rescue, Mitchell had insisted on staying with his wounded men during the helicopter evacuation, even though he was losing blood from his own injuries. He had refused medical attention until every one of his soldiers had been treated first. The Victoria Cross citation, which Marcus found in the official records, painted a picture of extraordinary valor, for conspicuous gallantry and exceptional devotion to duty in the face of extreme danger, displaying complete disregard for his own safety while saving the lives of 12 fellow servicemen under intense enemy fire. But what affected Marcus most were the personal stories that emerged throughout the day. Family members of the saved soldiers began sharing their gratitude online. A woman named Emma Harrison posted a photo of her 5-year-old daughter with the caption, "This little girl still has her daddy because of Sergeant Mitchell. How dare you mock a man who gave us our family back?" Another devastating response came from the mother of Private Daniel Roberts, who had died in Mitchell's arms despite the sergeant's desperate attempts to save him. "My son didn't make it home," she wrote, "but 12 other mothers got their boys back because of James Mitchell's courage. Your ignorance dishonors my son's memory and the sacrifice of a genuine hero." By afternoon, Marcus's video had been shared thousands of times, but now it was being used as an example of ignorance and disrespect rather than clever commentary. News outlets had picked up the story, and Marcus found himself being portrayed as the entitled young man who mocked a war hero. The turning point came when Marcus discovered that Sergeant Mitchell had specifically requested to be assigned to ceremonial duties after returning from Afghanistan. It wasn't a cushy job for someone avoiding real service. It was a form of therapy for a man dealing with survivor's guilt and post-traumatic stress. Standing guard at the palace gave him a sense of purpose and structure while he processed the trauma of losing friends in combat. Marcus realized that his casual cruelty had targeted someone who was already struggling with invisible wounds. The guard he had portrayed as living an easy life was actually fighting battles that Marcus couldn't even imagine. That evening, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. Despite his embarrassment and the growing backlash, he knew he had to make this right. He spent hours crafting a public apology, but every version seemed inadequate. How do you apologize for mocking someone's traumatic heroism? How do you take back words that had caused pain to grieving families and fellow veterans? But more than an apology, Marcus realized he needed to understand. He needed to learn about the man behind the medal and find a way to honor the truth he had so carelessly dismissed. The comfortable ignorance of his privileged perspective had been shattered, and there was no going back to the person he had been just 24 hours earlier. His journey from mockery to understanding was just beginning, and Marcus sensed that simply saying sorry would not be enough to repair the damage he had done or to truly comprehend the depth of service and sacrifice he had so thoughtlessly attacked. The summer heat in London was unbearable that Tuesday afternoon in July. 22-year-old Marcus Thompson wiped the sweat from his forehead as he scrolled through social media on his phone, walking aimlessly through the streets near Buckingham Palace. He had been unemployed for 6 months now, living off his parents' generosity while half-heartedly searching for work. His university friends had all moved on to successful careers, leaving Marcus feeling increasingly bitter about his own circumstances. As he approached the palace gates, Marcus noticed the familiar sight of tourists gathering around the stoic guards in their red tunics and tall bearskin hats. He had seen these scenes countless times before, but today something caught his attention differently. One particular guard stood perfectly still despite the oppressive heat, sweat visible on his face beneath the heavy ceremonial hat. What drew Marcus's eye, however, was the distinctive bronze cross medal pinned to the guard's chest. Marcus recognized it immediately as a Victoria Cross, Britain's highest military honor. But instead of feeling respect, a wave of cynicism washed over him. In his current state of mind, everything seemed fake or undeserved. He had grown increasingly resentful of people in positions of authority or recognition, viewing them as part of a system that had failed to give him the opportunities he felt he deserved. Taking out his phone, Marcus began recording a video, speaking in a mocking tone loud enough for nearby tourists to hear. "Look at this guy," he said, zooming in on the medal. "Probably got that fancy cross for sitting pretty in an office somewhere while real soldiers did the actual fighting. These ceremonial guards are just for show, nothing more than expensive mannequins for tourists to photograph. Several tourists looked uncomfortable and moved away, but Marcus was too caught up in his performance to notice their disapproval. He continued his commentary, his voice growing louder and more derisive. I bet half these medals are just handed out for completing basic training these days. Real courage doesn't come with fancy uniforms and tourist attractions. The guard, whose name was Sergeant James Mitchell, remained perfectly still throughout the verbal assault. His training had taught him to ignore distractions, but each word cut deep. The Victoria Cross on his chest wasn't just a piece of metal. It represented the most terrifying and transformative moment of his life, when he had risked everything to save his fellow soldiers in Afghanistan 3 years earlier. Marcus posted the video to his social media accounts with a caption that read, "Royal Guards living off taxpayer money with fake medals. Wake up, Britain." Within hours, the video had been shared dozens of times among his circle of friends who shared his cynical worldview. The comments were filled with laughing emojis and agreement with his assessment. What Marcus didn't realize was that his video had also reached people who knew the true story behind Sergeant Mitchell's Victoria Cross. Among the viewers was Sarah Collins, a military journalist who had covered the ceremony when Mitchell received his medal. She recognized him immediately and felt a surge of anger at the young man's ignorant mockery. Sarah began reaching out to her contacts, including veterans who had served with Mitchell and family members of soldiers whose lives he had saved. She was determined to set the record straight, not just for Mitchell's sake, but to educate people like Marcus about the reality behind the honors they so casually dismissed. Meanwhile, Marcus went about his evening feeling satisfied with his viral moment. He grabbed dinner at a local pub, where he showed the video to anyone who would watch, basking in the attention and agreement from strangers who shared his skeptical view of military honors. He felt clever for exposing what he saw as hollow pageantry. That night, as Marcus lay in bed scrolling through the continued shares and comments on his video, he had no idea that his casual act of mockery had set in motion a series of events that would completely change his understanding of courage, sacrifice, and the true meaning of the medal he had so thoughtlessly ridiculed. The comfortable bubble of ignorance he had built around himself was about to burst in the most unexpected way. The next morning would bring revelations that would shake Marcus to his core, forcing him to confront not just his misconceptions about Sergeant Mitchell, but his own character and the assumptions that had shaped his cynical worldview. The young man who thought he was exposing a fraud was about to discover that he had attacked a genuine hero, and the weight of that realization would transform him in ways he could never have anticipated.